Hey everyone, it's Ed here. Welcome to Behind the Mask, learning more about the clinical leaders who are driving healthcare transformation, but more on a personal level. We try to cover three broad topics. Who are you? How did you get here? And where are you going? And our guest is Dr. Peter Tippet. Peter, welcome to Behind the Mask.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So you and I have known each other for a little while now, probably, well, through the industry, many, many years, but probably more tightly the last 5 or 6 years. And I'm very well aware of some of the pioneering work that you're doing. Why don't you give us like a 60-second version of your background? It's quite extensive, but just some of the highlights as we jump into the personal side.
Well, thanks. Yeah, I compare myself to Gump, I think, Forrest Gump. I think I keep falling into these things that wind up being, like home runs. I guess it's a little bit of that going on. I was a tinkerer in high school. I was a ham radio operator and built the Heath kits and stuff. Wound up, working for a radio station because my girlfriend's dad was the chief engineer and got involved in the STEM engineering things. I wound up learning to fly when I was in high school and solo when I was 16, and more STEM related, applied things. I was we had a little teletype computer locked in a little closet that two of us were allowed to touch. It went 55 baud. It talked to a computer in the mountain and spoke Fortran. And I was the one and another guy allowed to touch that because it was a computer. um, and when I, got into college, I wound up going to an experiential school, and every year we did something off campus. And my senior year, I wound up chasing a girl to New York. She was going to go to work for George Plimpton of the New York Times, so I had to do something in New York. So I wrote every science author from a biochemistry book called Leninger and said, I love what you're doing, whatever the hell it is. How about if I come and do my thesis in your lab? It turned out that guy won the Nobel Prize. Who would have known, right?
Oh, yeah.
For synthesizing the first protein. He had one of those computers in the corner that nobody touches, which is a 55 baud teletype thing. And I wound up automating his solid phase peptide synthesis using that computer and a bunch of artisan glass blowers and things from under the streets of New York City, and wound up synthesizing the first active piece of an immunoglobulin. And I got some papers and things. And of course, there was another Nobel Prize winner in the building. This is at Rockefeller University. And I wound up with two Nobel Prize references, which will get you into medical school, even. So I got an MD PhD, and the PhD was in biochemistry, and wound up loving medicine and loving science. But I also had almost got thrown out of medical school because I had a little company going on the side. And they said, are you interested in the company and business, or you're interested in, medicine and science and, purity of academics? And I wasn't hiding anything. That company was somebody else trying to make a solid phase peptide synthesizer, and they just wanted me to help out a little bit on the side. So I kept my nose clean and got through that. But in the middle of my residency, I wrote some software and was the president of Cleveland Osborne Group, and wrote some stuff that wound up eventually becoming what's now called Norton antivirus, and made utilities and the rescue disk and a bunch of the pieces that were part of the Norton utilities. Eventually, I did the first antivirus and sold my company to them. And then, there's another home run. So these are kind of the Gump falling into winning the ping pong tournament, if you ask me, right? It's like, I'm not much of a programmer, but right place at the right time is a lot of success in the world. And then I went on to do a few other computer security related companies. And now I've come back to medicine with this CareMesh company, trying to improve communication and getting groups of people to work more effectively in healthcare.
Yeah, people should look you up for even more information. You have fascinating background. You didn't mention, but for the sake of time and brevity, like your chief medical officer type roles, like Verizon, and it's just pioneering a lot of different things, and really, I think leading the beginning of the whole digital transformation. So, Peter, at what age did you realize you were a leader?
I'm not. I think leaders are people who where other people say, "Yeah, let's do that," right? And I don't think, I was enamored by leaders, my friends who'd say, "Let's do this," and it occurred to me that being the person that came up with a few of those ideas, and corralled the group of folks was interesting place to be. So I was surprised. I was constantly surprised that people would follow some of the things I did. And it wasn't until probably I was 30 that I looked back on it and said,
Yeah.
oh, that's a little bit of what must be leadership.
Hey, you left us hanging. What happened to the woman that you followed to New York City?
Didn't quite work out, but all the other stuff did.
That one wasn't a home run, but it led you to the get up to home plate. Um,
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
what's one thing your parents forced you to do when you were young and you probably like rolled your eyes or like kind of murmured under your breath, but now that you look back, you're like, oh, I'm glad they made me do that.
It's all the wash the dishes things and the mow the grass and the it's hot outside. And I remember doing a paper route that, oh my God, it's steamy dripping in the summer and snow up to your knees in the winter. And it's the worth ethic stuff. I think that comes and comes. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah.
What did your parents do for a profession?
My father was a sales guy for sold insurance, and but he was one of these guys that when somebody called at dinner time, he'd take the call and say, "Look, let me help you here. Your son is never going to get insurance the way you're working. Let's do it this way." And he showed him the loopholes to make it work, and was kind of on the side of the customer. And I think that learning how to be on the side of the customer and doing the right thing on behalf of your patient or your
Yeah.
customer or whoever it is the clear message there.
Yeah, I'm sure your parents are super, super proud of all that you've done this far. What is one thing, Peter, that you can share with us that 90% of your coworkers or the company people that worked in your companies wouldn't know?
I don't a lot of that story I just told you, most people wouldn't know. The ham radio or early, tinkering stuff. Uh, I don't publish or in the flying world, in the airplane. I've sold when I was 16, but got a commercial license and a flight instructor and airline transport and all the things
Wow.
long before I was a doctor.
Yeah.
Um, in medicine or in flying, people think doctors are bad pilots, mainly because they got more money than brains when it comes to being safe and less gung ho and all that. So I kind of hide the fact in my flying world that I'm a doctor, and I hide the fact in the doctor world that I'm a pilot.
No, I love it. That's great. Was there a defining moment? Yeah, you gave us a great history. Was there one defining moment though that's kind of served like as a catalyst, like this is where I'm going, you know, something that happened or experience?
I did get called back into the dean of the medical school where they said, "Where are you going to put your energy? Are you going to focus or aren't you?" And we they weren't saying academics is the only way to go. They were saying pick something and focus.
Yeah.
And I think that's a key element. Getting a kick in the pants um, is often a really good defining moment. And you're welcome to leave this MD PhD and go do whatever the hell it is you want to do.
So, Peter, where did you grow up? What state?
I grew up in Michigan, Dearborn outside of Detroit. Was enamored with the auto industry and how it worked. In fact, one of my kicks lately is around how did Toyota and the Japanese auto industry wind up kicking Detroit's,
Yeah.
behind? Um, and they invented this Kanban board thing, which we call swim lanes, dividing a work process into 15 or 20 steps and then religiously figuring out how to fix this step or move this one before that one or whatever. And of course, Salesforce and Monday and other tools have put those into software and have helped whole organizations, not in healthcare, of course,
Yeah.
move forward and get their teams working more effectively and efficiently together. And so that's a Detroit thing. Is Detroit was in the making big heavy black cars that rotted and rusted to death and taking a lot of time and not particularly efficiently making the whole
Yeah.
industry work. Yeah.
That's a whole episode in and of itself. Yeah, there's a great book called The Whiz Kids, which you may have come across. How the automotive industry, most out of Detroit, really took off in the United States after World War II using computers and data, a lot of rigorous data analysis. But
Yeah.
yeah, we lost our way. So yeah, that's good. We should tackle that some other time. What's
Well,
some?
it's true. Any big organization is harder and harder to change.
Oh
You
yeah,
and I have both worked for big organizations,
yeah,
and it's one of the reasons we like the little organizations because we are enamored with the fact that these people can just change gears and say, "Well,
yeah.
if that's what you want, let's just do it." Yeah.
Let's talk about the hard stuff that you've had to come across in your career. Was there a time that someone tried to hold you back from doing what you wanted to do, and how did you respond?
Gosh, uh, I have, especially in big companies. I won't name them, but I've been in Fortune 20s. It's very, very common for for the groupthink to prevail
Yeah,
and to not be able to get through the wall of it's good. You can be good for the company and get 90% of the decision makers to believe you. But in large organizations, it's common for everybody that's senior to have a veto right. They
yeah.
don't look at it that way, but it winds up being that way. Um,
Yeah.
I just kept my head down and try again, and try again, and try again, and try on a different subject and stick with the customer matters most. And let's do the right thing for the company and the customer.
Yeah, that's such an important point because what happens is you're faced with a decision when you're in those circumstances, and one is to assimilate and become like the others, right? You're gung ho because it's the right thing to do. You run into that interference or that one veto, and so a lot of people we're just wired like take the easy path, just assimilate and it's a nice job and you make your money and whatever, or you're very mission focused and your heart is driving you in the passion, and you have to at some point you have to cut bait and move on, or you keep fighting within that organization until the right decisions are made. So kudos to you for all the
Well,
all,
it's an attitude thing. If you can keep the positive attitude and keep
yeah.
those 90% of people on your side and try a different problem and eventually get something through that'll work for everybody, you wind up learning what the organizational culture is and figure out what will work. It's like any other problem. You have to figure out where the real problems are, right? Where the real obstacles are and work your way through it. And many times it takes a lot longer than you think. Even in startups, it takes forever to get whatever it is you've got. It doesn't matter how good the mousetrap is. It's really hard to get people to even know it's worth talking to you about your new mousetrap.
So Peter, did you ever quit something and then maybe later regret it?
Oh gosh. Um, I I think the things that I quit and regretted were the dutiful things that I regretted, finishing the job for grandma or
Yeah.
whatever. The same is true for, I had a really couple of really cool product ideas in the big companies that I eventually gave up on, and I kicked myself and thought, if I'd worked a different pathway again, or recruited some other people or something, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, let's talk about where you're headed. So Peter, if you were talking to the next generation, maybe it was at graduation, since there's all sorts of graduations happening, you're the commencement speaker. What's one thing you would tell people to relish in the journey? You know, that now that we have a little bit of years behind us, we probably look back and like, I wish I would have relished that moment longer, or that part of my career longer. Is there something that you would tell them to relish, you know, that you and I may have just like tried to speed through?
Yeah, it really is to figure out who the people are around you in that organization that you're working for. You know, the best way to succeed is to work out who these people are and what drives them, and align that with what the company really needs.
Yeah.
I did give a commencement speech. I think it was horrible. You really, it's harder to do than you might expect. I didn't do it this year. It's a couple years back. You really need a personal connection or some connection to make that high end work.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
yeah.
we'll go stalk you on it.
There's a failure of mine, one of many.
We'll look it up. We'll stalk you on the internet and find it. Hey, well, last question. What challenges and goals are you undertaking on the personal side? So we know you're doing great things on the professional side. What about on the personal side? What other things you fly? But are there some other things that you're thinking about or currently undertaking?
I am really trying to figure out how to bring in some of this STEM education. We know that women are understemmed in their upbringing. That's sort of, I'm sure all of those words don't work exactly, but you know what
Yeah,
where
I
I'm
hear you.
going. And it's not just women. There's all kinds of groups of people that don't get the exposure that I had, or I had mowed the grass and paid for half of my flying. That was the deal, right? I painted houses. I make half, and whatever I make, you match as a parent. Then I could go learn how to fly. I had to get a ride to the airport, but I had to pay half of the load.
Yeah.
And but I still had an opportunity that probably 80% of people don't have when they're in high school or college. And so I've been looking for better and better ways to sort of solve that, and also to figure out how to really bring this. Most colleges, most universities have a think organization, or an innovation group, or a course or something that's trying to bring people along. And a lot of it tends to be simplistic, and trying to figure out what is the deeper meaning behind, or level behind, innovation, or getting it into third gear, or bringing products to market, or changing the way work is done. I think that's really tricky. I don't think we have much of a science around that. So
Yeah, that'd be very cool. Well, Peter, I think you really are one of the more fascinating people in healthcare. Your whole journey. We just touched the surface on behind the mask, but you're just out of this conversation. I was picking up solid just insights into how to do amazing things in the world like you have. So thank you for being our guest and sharing your personal side on behind the mask.